The United States is once again escalating with China on the question of Taiwan. And oftentimes, when we talk about escalations relating to Taiwan, we are talking about political and military provocations. And those indeed are continuing. The United States has not let up its constant sailing of warships and flying of spy planes over the Taiwan Straits. No, it has not done that. The United States has also not revoked any of its promises to arm Taiwan. You have about 19 billion US dollars in overall arms sales, many of which is backlogged. But you also have new drawdown authority being asserted by Biden, the same authority that he has asserted with Ukraine in order to endlessly arm Taiwan as a porcupine ready to defend the island against China, which is a euphemism for ready to fight a war against China on behalf of the United States. Of course, this is all fantasy, and this is not a reality. The reality is that any kind of hot war, hot conflict between the United States and China would inevitably go nuclear because neither country has any kind of interest in waging a long war like the one that is going on in Ukraine and violating the one China principle that the United States would be doing if it engaged in such a conflict would be a breach of international law and would essentially hold much bigger ramifications than even what is going on in Ukraine, believe it or not. But now the Biden administration is not just escalating militarily on the question of Taiwan, it is ramping up the economic war with China around Taiwan. So it's almost a double dip here. It is that the United States is saying that not only is it going to militarize the island, which is internationally recognized as part of China, but it's also going to engage in economic relations that signal independence, and it is making China furious, and understandably so. So, Joe Biden has signed a law approving a U.S.-Taiwan trade agreement to boost bilateral economic ties. Now, mind you, bilateral means between nations generally. That is international law speak. So you don't generally have bilateral relations with the territory of a sovereign country. So that's just the first thing. But the agreement covers streamlining customs procedures, combating corruption, and helping small businesses navigate regulatory procedures in both markets. Legislative branch authority asserted as law requires U.S. Trade Representative to brief Congress on negotiations with Taiwan. So according to the South China Morning Post, the U.S. President Joe Biden signed into law a bill that approves the first agreement negotiated under the U.S.-Taiwan Initiative on 21st Century Trade and commits the administration to consult Congress for future agreements under the initiative. The agreement, which was signed originally June 1st, covers streamlining customs procedures, combating corruption, helping small businesses navigate regulatory procedures in each market. It broadly aims to strengthen the U.S.-Taiwan trade and economic relationship, but does not include any market access provisions. Again, this is very common for the United States. What that means is that the United States is kind of dictating economic relations singularly. This is why it's the hegemon. Taiwan is simply and merely a territory of China that is unfortunately under the reign and rule of an authority that is claiming independence or trying to claim independence. Not so subtly, but as subtly, I guess, as you can expect. Nonetheless, it is the first of several agreements expected under this trade initiative, a framework for bilateral talks jointly launched by the two sides of June last year. The bill, called the United States-Taiwan Initiative on 21st Century Trade Agreement Implementation Act, was first announced in June by leaders of the Senate Finance Committee and the House and Ways Means Committee. It passed the House the same month and the Senate in July. Republican Congressman Jason Smith of Missouri, the sponsor of the House version and chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, said last week the bill was headed to the president's desk that, quote, China continues to threaten American interests, and Taiwan has maintained a close relationship with America. This legislation strengthens that relationship with this vital ally and ensures the American people have a powerful voice through their representatives in future trade negotiations. Observers noted that the bill was much more about asserting congressional authority over trade policy as it was about showing support for enhanced engagement with Taiwan. The new law requires the U.S. Trade Representative to show and allow Congress to review any future negotiating texts of the initiative before sharing with Taiwan, share any texts drafted by Taiwan within 3 days, and provide daily briefings to Congress for initiating negotiating rounds. It also requires the future agreements not to take effect unless the U.S. president makes the text publicly available 60 days before entering the deal and a bill approving it is enacted into law. In a statement on Monday, Biden voiced concern over a portion of the law. In cases where the requirements of Section 7 of the Act would intermissibly infringe upon my constitutional authority to negotiate with a foreign partner, my administration will treat them as non-binding. So the argument is not, first of all, you can tell that there is some partisanship happening here. There's some clashing. The Republican majority Congress wants to weaken the Democratic Party president's power to negotiate with Taiwan. I could also see that too as trying to be careful about how these negotiations are actually taking place, because they're literally playing with fire with China here. But I don't give them the benefit of the doubt there, especially the rabidly anti-China Republican faction of the neocon foreign policy establishment. But Joe Biden here once again reinforces, and remember, it's Joe Biden that has said more than 4 times now that the United States is ready to defend Taiwan from China, meaning that the United States will militarily intervene when it deems it necessary to do so. This is also the same Biden administration which did nothing to stop Pelosi from visiting Taiwan, did nothing to prevent Kevin McCarthy from meeting with Tsai Ing-wen in California, and is doing nothing to stop Lee Ching-te, the candidate for the Democratic Progressive Party, the current ruling party of Taiwan's authority, from visiting the United States on his way to, I believe it's going to be Paraguay or Peru later this month, later in August 2023. The Biden administration has supported these pro-independence initiatives from the beginning. So both chambers are now considering the bill authorizing administration to negotiate a tax agreement with Taipei that would offer residents in the U.S. and Taiwan relief from double taxation. The bill cleared a key Senate committee last month. So there's obviously moves to make official ties, economic ties with Taiwan. And of course, China has sent a stern warning against such an action, and rightfully so, because calling relations with Taiwan bilateral, cosplaying the fact that this is a partner, is reifying and reinforcing the notion that Taiwan is independent. Taiwan is not a nation, and not even the so-called Constitution of the Republic of China makes any indication of that occurring. And we should note that China's red line is independence, any kind of declaration of independence. And should that happen, China sees it as a duty to militarily intervene to prevent such a scenario. And that is the policy. And so really the policy is military intervention is the last straw to protect and defend its sovereignty. But nonetheless, China has to warn, and it is warning the United States to revoke this reckless trade act. And here is what the China side had to say. China urges the U.S. to revoke the so-called U.S.-Taiwan initiative on 21st century Trade First Agreement Implementation Act. Doesn't that just roll off the tongue? A Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson said. The spokesperson made the remarks in response to a query of the U.S.'s signing into law the so-called act. China strongly opposes official interaction of any form between China's Taiwan region and countries that have diplomatic relations with China. That includes negotiating or signing any agreement with implication of sovereignty or of official nature. The U.S. move violates the One China principle in the 3 China-U.S. joint communiques, contravenes its own commitment to maintaining only unofficial relations with Taiwan and sends a wrong message to separatist forces seeking Taiwan independence, the spokesperson said. The spokesperson said China is unwavering in its resolve to safeguard its sovereignty and territorial integrity, urging the United States for a course correction immediately, to revoke the so-called act, to stop pushing forward negotiations on the so-called initiative, and to stop going down the wrong path. So indeed, the United States is going down the wrong path here. Let me end the share. And now Taiwan is being, of course, Taiwan has always been part of this economic war. TSMC, the major manufacturing hub of semiconductor chips worldwide, but really the heart and soul of the economy in Taiwan, is caught up in this as well. The head of TSMC had to say that no, it's not going to move its operations out of Taiwan because there have been suspicions and murmurs that perhaps Taiwan is literally going to outsource its entire semiconductor industry to the US to reap short-term benefits and profits, of course, for the from a gargantuan US contracts, but essentially strip Taiwan of its entire economy, and that would lead to recession. And I've had Xiang Yu, who right now is currently in Taiwan doing his mandatory service. He has said as much, that this economic war around chips is really about stripping Taiwan of its ability to produce these chips, bringing that to the United States as part of a way to weaken China. So Taiwan is not simply a friend, and no matter how much the United States tries to posit this. In fact, everything that the United States is doing around Taiwan only leaves the island of Taiwan more likely to be caught in the crossfire of what really is a US directed war. But nonetheless, it's not just because we can't talk about economic war and Taiwan without also talking about the fact that there is an election coming up in Taiwan. So this coming January 2024, the regional presidential election is going to occur. And there have been a lot of things said, and I've had many people on this channel comment on this upcoming election. And it's a very complicated issue and situation because on the one hand, the DPP, the ruling party, is rightfully seen as politically illegitimate at this point. There are many people who are unhappy on Taiwan Island, on the island of Taiwan, with its rule, not least because there's been a lot of focus on provocation with China, not a lot of focus on the problems happening in Taiwan. Sound a little bit familiar to all of us, all of my viewers in the collective West right now? But I want to show you a provocation that's kind of happening in league with this economic tensions, because I think it goes along with the problem here. So Lai, Mr. Lai, Ching-te Lai, I think his name is, Lai Ching-te, he is going to visit the United States. All right. So here's the Global Times report. The DPP candidate Lai's stopover in the U.S. is going to cause new tension. Washington's encouragement for Taiwan secessionists will add new difficulties to mainland peace efforts. And here you have civil groups protesting on Taiwan last May, opposing Taiwan secessionism. And the sign reads, the U.S. act of the warmonger of inciting conflicts and making troubles to harm Taiwan. So that was happening in May, in opposition to what was another visit, another official visit to the United States. This time it was Tsai Ing-wen. So the election is coming up in January 2024, and the Taiwan Secessionist Democratic Progressive Party's candidate for this regional election, Lai Ching-te, also deputy regional leader, will make stopovers in New York and San Francisco during his August 12th to 18th trip to Paraguay, the Taiwan External Affairs Authority announced on Wednesday. However, this will become a new incident to worsen tension in the Taiwan Straits and another evidence of the U.S.'s encouragement toward Taiwan secessionism, which is absolutely contradictory to the U.S.'s promises of opposing Taiwan independence. And the reason why I'm reading this article is to give you an understanding of how complicated the political situation is on Taiwan right now. Taiwan observers are also concerned the incident will seriously impact the regional leaders' campaign next year. Cao Zhengliang, a Taiwan political scientist and former politician, told media that the DPP candidate's activity in the U.S. will definitely bring a response from the Chinese mainland. For Lai's rivals in the campaign, this could be a chance to overturn the situation, as Lai is still the frontrunner in the polls. Other analysts said Lai could use his U.S. stopover to maximize his advantages if his opponents fail to grab the opportunity to expose Lai's dangerous nature to Taiwan voters. So that's the thing, is that people in Taiwan, Chinese people in Taiwan, are indeed angry about these provocations. They don't agree. Most people don't want a war. Most people are for the status quo that has been shown over and over and over again in many different polls, many different, and I'll show you some of these actually, okay? Because there is indeed a push in Taiwan for something different. I don't think that the majority of people want a war with China. However, the political conditions are quite complicated. And before I get to the polling numbers, because I will have to find them, but let's get to the rest of the article before I get into the fact that there actually is increasing tensions about this policy. So at present, there are three major political parties on the island of Taiwan, and they've all nominated their candidates for the election, with some media observers on the island claiming that this is a war versus peace campaign. Many are concerned that if Lai wins the election, Taiwan authorities will become even more extreme in seeking secessionism, forcing the Chinese mainland to solve the Taiwan question through more direct means. Each time Taiwan enters an election campaign, the U.S., as always, plays a key role in manipulating public opinion and the political landscape within the island. In the past, when anti-secessionist forces have control over the island, the U.S. interrupts cross-strait cooperation and exchanges by all means, including instigating color revolutions, such as the Sunflower Movement. That was around, I think, 10 years ago. When the secessionist authorities rule the island, the U.S. uses its advantages in both hard and soft power to encourage Taiwan secessionists to provoke and offend the mainland in the name of democracy. This is why the mainland finds that there is a limit to pushing peaceful reunification by merely providing economic interests in sharing development benefits with the island to make the island more intertwined, so that political negotiation for a solution on the Taiwan question will take place, and then we can realize reunification peacefully. So that's the thing, is that while, and this is a huge point, it is true that economic ties between the mainland and Taiwan are really robust. But because of the political manipulation, it hasn't had the effect politically as you might think, right? That there has been a push to move public opinion toward independence. No matter which party rules the island, they are unable to or have no sincerity to push political negotiation with the mainland when it comes to reunification. Meanwhile, they are reluctant to give up the benefit from trade and people-to-people exchanges with the mainland. The U.S.'s interruption and Taiwan's secessionist hostility toward the mainland are among the main reasons for tensions in the Taiwan Straits, and is the main obstacle for peaceful reunification. And it would be ridiculous to blame the mainland over the worsening situation, because the mainland has remained restrained and patient. This is from a professor at the Taiwan Research Center, SGMN University, Li Fei. So, according to one Beijing-based expert on Taiwan studies, the military drills and other relevant activities conducted by the PLA around the island were forced from provocations made by the U.S. and Taiwan secessionists. And if we can realize reunification peacefully by economic integration, why would we choose a costly and dangerous military solution? And that's indeed true. China, each time Pelosi and then Kevin McCarthy conducted live fire drills, surrounded the island, mimicked what a blockade would look like of Taiwan should the U.S. be the invader, right? Because this is the U.S. invading. Let's get it out of our heads that China would be the one invading. The U.S. would be invading because the U.S. is stepping outside of its sovereign territory to interfere in the affairs of another country. And each time that happened, it was because the US had essentially facilitated meetings of an official nature with Taiwan's political establishment. On July 23rd, the KMT, the main opposition party on the island, formally nominated Hui Yui to be the candidate for 24 election, with Hui claiming that the KMT will keep opposing Taiwan independence. But polls conducted by many Taiwan media and institutions shows that Hui has only around 20 to 24%, standing in third place. Another opposition party candidate, Kuo Wen-jae of Taiwan People's Party, enjoys 25 to 28% ranks and is in second place, with Lai on top at about 35%. So there you have it. You have actually the polls showing in Taiwan that it is not the KMT that is actually winning, or that actually has an advantage right now. In fact, what is happening is that Taiwan politically is so manipulated, is so interfered with, and there has been such a huge push to there is such a huge push for independence that still, despite all of the misgivings of the DPP, despite all the misgivings with it, it still leads. And that this mimics kind of the political situation that you have in the United States, with no matter how bad things become, polls tend to suggest that like incumbents still are leading. And that's because the political situation is so manipulated, people have so little hope, and perhaps the political parties are so untrustworthy that people tend to vote based on that rather than maybe specific and concrete interests. So the reasons why the KMT candidate is struggling to win popular support are complicated, including a lack of solidarity within the party and Huo's shortcomings as a candidate, and many young voters feeling exhausted over choosing between the KMT and DPP. Thus, many of them will disapprove of the DPP, will tend to give their votes to the emerging Taiwan People's Party, said observers in Taiwan who are reached by the Global Times. So, in effect, the vote is split. However, it's dangerous that if the challengers that aim to end the DPP's ruling fail to stand together and fail to win a majority, as the anti-DPP vote will become divided, DPP's Lai, who styles himself as pragmatic worker of Taiwan independence, will become the next regional leader and create dangerous uncertainty to the cross-strait situation in the future. So the Taiwan Public Opinion Foundation, so this is what I was going to get to, a nonprofit organization on the island and a major polling agency, published a poll on May 12th that showed 47.2% of Taiwan residents want to end DPP rule, while 41.7% accepted the DPP to stay in power. On July 23rd, the organization published another poll that showed 49% disagree with the DPP's policy in governing Taiwan under Tsai Ing-wen's authority. However, despite the majority of Taiwan voters expressing disappointment over the DPP's poor governance over the last 8 years, the DPP candidate remains more popular than his two major opponents. The main reason is that the two candidates have divided the voters who disapprove of the DPP, but another reason is that Lai holds a key to maintain approval rating, claiming that the 2024 election is a democracy versus authoritarian campaign or a Washington versus Beijing campaign. So another interesting poll from the TPOF on June 28th, who's the U.S. most favorite candidate of the 2024 election? The results show that 54% of Taiwan participants believe that Lai is the U.S.'s choice, with Ko and Huo only getting 12% each. Lai recently told the media that Taiwan media and politicians should not question or criticize the U.S. because the U.S. has defended Taiwan for decades and helped Taiwan develop its economy, and it's the mainland that tries to annex Taiwan, noting that the U.S. wouldn't like a pro-mainland regime on the island. So there you have it. So you have a divided vote, okay? And this goes on and on and on. But you have a divided vote, okay, among the opposition. So it's bad news, really, for the Taiwan question, the situation, the conflict that the U.S. is waging against China, using Taiwan as a proxy. But at the same time, the good news is that more and more people on the island are showing through these polls, through the Taiwan Public Opinion Foundation, that indeed there's not a lot of appetite for the policies of the DPP right now. So how that contradiction is going to play out officially remains to be seen. It is very possible that the DPP wins again, but I don't think that the sentiment is going to go away. And it's not a given that they'll win. There's still a lot of time between now and January 2024. And of course, Lai Ching-te's visit to the United States is going to pour fuel on the fire. Can these candidates take advantage of this? Can they highlight the fact that the one China principle is being soiled upon, is being destroyed, not just by these official visits, but also by this key legislation in the realm of economics, which posits that Taiwan is some kind of official bilateral economic partner to the United States, which, on the one hand, is a dangerous provocation and violation of the one China principle. And on the other, we have to question whether this really is going to work out in Taiwan's favor, getting closer to the United States at the expense of relations with China. I don't believe it will. I believe that China and Taiwan have complementarity and have a lot that they can continue to build together as one territory on the road to reunification, rather than a path that is being chosen by the United States for Taiwan to separate from China and essentially spark a war. That is the ultimate goal of the United States. Make no mistake about it. And it's not because the United States just wants to blow up the world. It is because the United States sees no other option, that there's only one real area of potential conflict to begin, and that is over the Taiwan Straits crisis. This isn't the first time. In the 1950s, there were two Taiwan Straits crises, and both of those led to near nuclear war, of course, waged by the United States. China did not have a nuclear bomb until 1964. But a big reason why China built one is because it was threatened twice with nuclear conflict. And so, remember, you might remember Dean Acheson and these rabid neocons as part of the US's regime that was doing the same during the Korean War, the invasion of Korea, and of course was ramping up hostilities with the Soviet Union after the official dropping of the atomic bomb on Japan, which was a message to the Soviet Union of what the US can do should the Soviet Union try it. Essentially, it was a threat as much as it was a weapon to use to, it wasn't to end the war because the Soviet Union was about to end it, was marching on Manchuria, but it was essentially the parting call of the United States in the war to say, this is the next phase. The next phase is for us to use nuclear armaments against the real enemy, which was the Soviet Union. That was the basis of the Cold War. And so we're in that situation, a similar situation now, and it's only going to get more dangerous. And so this economic war that now includes Taiwan, and it's continued to include Taiwan more and more so, the more that the United States entangles the island of Taiwan into its economic vice grip, the more that it tries to squeeze every ounce and bit out of Asia and Taiwan specifically for influence and dominance economically, the more that the political and military situation around the Taiwan question will deteriorate because it's all interconnected. And so we will have to see what happens in January, but we do know that there's going to be another official visit. We don't know if Lai Ching-te is going to meet with anybody, but we know he's coming, and we know that it's only going to worsen the situation diplomatically, politically, and militarily between China and the United States, and that is bad news. The good news, though, is that you're watching this program and that you're becoming more aware of this problem so that we can spread the word and change public opinion for the better so that we can move toward actual peace with justice in our time. From a geopolitical perspective, as much as we are trying to, and hopefully trying to do so in all realms of political life. Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.